Okay, so we're going to start moving into part 3 of the Phylum Cnidaria lecture. And the last thing I wanted to mention about Cnidaria is we're talking about anemones. I got this little thing called a basal disc. It's how they suction down onto things. They have their opening, gastrovascular cavity, and then their tentacles. Some of the anemones have a symbiotic relationship with fish. So again, Finding Nemo, the clownfish, Nemo lives in the tentacles, and this is an interesting relationship because it's classified as what we call commensalism. Let me spell this. C-O-M-M-E-N-S-A-L-I-S-M. Commensalism or commensalistic, which means one gets a benefit, the other one there's no benefit or loss to the other species. So the fish, clownfish, actually hide in the tentacles and have protection from danger because the tentacles can sting other things. But the anemone doesn't really get anything. It's not recognized as a value or benefit to the anemone. So when we get into ecology and we talk about ecological relationships, we'll revisit this and try to figure out what's the point of this? What's the value to the anemone? Is there a reason for that relationship to continue? So, okay, all right. So now that was class Anthozoa, anemones and corals. The next class to talk about within Cnidaria are the cubozoans. So cubozoans include the box jellies and the jellyfish, sea wasps, the jellyfish known as the sea wasps. Okay, so these guys have incredibly toxic cnidocytes, and the nematocysts coming out have a very, very potent toxin or protein-based structure in them. So these hurt bad. So what you're looking at here, this is a box jelly. So it has a little box shape to it. Let me do it in yellow. And what we'll see is the tentacles are disproportionately long in the box jelly. They're 2, sometimes 3 times the length of the body. That's how you know it's a box jelly. The common jellyfish, the tentacles are much, much shorter. And then those stinging harpoons that they shoot out hurt like heck. They are incredibly painful. So one of these alone, no big deal. You kind of push it away. If you're snorkeling, you have your fin. You could use your fin to push it away. You're going to be okay. The challenge is when you get into a swarm of them. So these are sea wasps. So there's a swarm of them. There's hundreds of these things. So you start swimming around and you get into this swarm. Swarm's not trying to attack you, but you're now moving into it and they're just bumping into you. And each of these tentacles, that's what's crazy about it. Each of the tentacles, this is in a very, very enlarged view, may have hundreds of little nematocysts coming out of it. So one tentacle hits you and they're discharging hundreds of those little bullets into your skin. It's not a good thing. It's a bad day for you. So the next couple pictures here, this is what it looks like when people get hit by box jellies. So notice those red welts, especially the picture to the right. That line here, you can see that is a tentacle. That is the length of the tentacle that hit that girl, that swimmer there. Look at this woman's arm. All of these, you can see where those are the tentacle lines. And every one of those lines contains hundreds and hundreds of cnidocytes. And then the nematocysts getting shot out. So really, really painful. Avoid these guys at all costs. The deadliest animal in the ocean, the animal that actually kills the most people globally, are box jellies. Now, we don't have them in big numbers in the U.S. coastal waters, but you go to Australia, the Indo-Pacific region, and they can be problematic. So these guys, beaches will often put up jellyfish nets to try to prevent the movement of those jellies to the inside of the net along the beach area. So, okay, cool. We're protecting our swimmers, and you look at these big resorts and all these people on the beach trying to have a good time. You want to protect the waters and keep them safe. So the nets are designed to block the jellies from drifting inward. It's a great concept. Sometimes it works well. Other times the jellies are so small they can fit through the pores of the net. Nets get redesigned to make sure their pores are small enough to block it. But then there's the problem of the collateral damage of the jellyfish nets, because the nets get blown out into the ocean during big storms and hurricanes, and then you have all sorts of collateral damage. Those nets tangle up into a lot of different marine life and create large-scale problems globally for the marine life tangled in the jelly nets that get blown out. So it becomes a cost-benefit analysis. Yes, we want to protect people, we want to protect the resorts, we want to have nice beaches, but is there a better way of doing it than using nets that can potentially create larger collateral damage in the marine ecosystem? Okay, so Cubozoa, cube, remember them that way, cubes, these little cubes or boxes with big long tentacles coming off of them. The number of tentacles varies. There's no standard this many tentacles to a box jelly, but big long tentacles that hurt like heck. So be very careful if you guys get exposed to cubozoans. Common jellyfish, not a problem. They're fun to play with. Cubozoans, don't touch them. So, all right, our third class, Hydrozoa, the hydras. So these are the hydroids, or hydras. And what we're going to see with these guys is they often alternate between the, let me move my links, between the polyp and medusa body plan. So sometimes they do it within their life cycle, other times it's you're this and then you go to this and that's it, and then sometimes they circle back. So a lot of variation on which body plan is going to be ideal for them the whole time. So they're Cnidarians. They have the stinging cells. These guys, though, this is the one group we see members of this group living in fresh water, and that is the hydra. So in the fresh water, we have a hydra. It is only going to be found in a polyp form. So that's that body plan like that. There's our gastrovascular cavity. And then the little tentacles. The marine version, well, these guys can take on a whole bunch of different shapes when we deal with the body plans. They're hydras, but they can gather together, they can become colonial, etc., etc., and I'll go into that in a little bit here. So, all right, so when we're talking about freshwater Cnidarians, this is a class that has the example, the hydra. When it comes to reproduction, they will reproduce asexually through budding. So I got a little video link, a little hyperlink here. I'd ask you guys check that out. And what's really cool when it comes to feeding, these guys are pretty active. They're kind of fun to watch. They're active predators. Little things will move around, they'll hit their tentacles, and then they just go to town with those tentacles, stabbing them to death with the little nematocysts, drawing it back into the gastrovascular cavity. So you can check out the hyperlinks. If for some reason the links have broken, just go to YouTube, Google hydra budding, Google hydra eating Daphnia, and they're just some fun little videos to watch over how these guys are feeding and then also reproducing. Okay, so the marine one I want to mention. The body plan is a colony of polyps. And you have all these different polyps attached to each other. They'll have a common central canal or channel. And then some of the polyps become specialized. And this is where it gets a little weird. You're colonial, but you're kind of working as a team. Are you now truly becoming multicellular? Are you becoming one organism? It's a weird dynamic. Some of the polyps are feeding polyps. Those polyps have tentacles. So it makes sense. You got tentacles. You can kill food, grab food, draw the food down into your gastrovascular cavity, and then the nutrients diffuse over to everybody else. Kind of shared digestive tract, digestive system. So everybody benefits if this one gets food up here. When it comes to reproduction, there are no tentacles on it. The reproductive polyp lacks tentacles. It doesn't feed, it reproduces. Inside of it, it will develop the little medusas, the medusa body plan. So those little medusa structures build up inside here, and then the reproductive polyp will open up. It will release the medusas. Now, when the medusa get released, one of the medusas is going to produce eggs, the other one produces sperm. They release the egg and sperm into the water column. Fertilization happens, zygote forms, and then that zygote develops into the little planula. That's our little creature down here. That planula swims around, eventually settles on a substrate, attaches to something solid, and then develops into the polyp body plan. Then that polyp grows, divides. Here's mature polyp. Some of them develop tentacles for feeding. Other polyps will become the reproductive polyps and be the medusa, or produce the next generation of medusas. Right? So kind of a weird scenario where part of your life cycle you're a medusa, other part of your life cycle you're a polyp. With the Cnidarians that we've already talked about, the cubozoans, they're always medusas. With the anemones, they're always polyps. It's one or the other. These guys use both body plans throughout their life cycle. Okay, so the really cool one, but scary one to mention is the Portuguese Manofwar. Superficially, this looks like a jellyfish. You're like, oh, well, jellyfish are in Cubozoa, or they're in the other class called Schizozoa. Those are just jellies. But Portuguese Manofwars are actually hydroids. They're a collection of polyps that have all gathered together, and they all work as one big colonial organism. Now, there's 3 varieties of polyps within the Portuguese Manofwar. The first variety is called the gastrozoid. This is the polyp that's responsible for feeding. So it's going to have the tentacles with the stinging cells that can gather food. The gonozoid polyp is going to be the polyp that is used for reproduction. So that's the polyp that will produce the new medusas. And then the dactylozoid polyp is the polyp that is going to have defensive structures in it. So the nematocysts coming out of this one are different than the gastrozoid nematocysts. So a weird colonial polyp or colonial organism that all these different polyps come together and work as one big team, and they function. Now, the thing to warn you guys about, be very, very careful if you ever have contact or see one of these guys. On the surface, you got this little polyp that inflates like a balloon and acts as a sail and blows it around. But under the water, those tentacles, on some of these guys, the tentacles can be 20 feet long. So you may be like, oh, look at this little balloon that's only about 6 inches, but you got 20-foot tentacles underneath the water column there. That gets tangled into you, or you get tangled into that, it's going to be a big, big problem. People get stung by these in the water, they can go into anaphylactic shock, and then they can drown. But it's weird is this one little species of fish called Nomius can actually live within the tentacles of the Portuguese Manofwar and never get stung. So it's another relationship of commensalism. All All right, so we'll check out the last group in the next lecture.